So we're going to summarize what Mrs. Jones and I talked about in the work session. The County Council did keep the appropriations from the draft budget last night in their approval. So we'll take a look at some revisions, and we will need the board approval to finalize the budget and then send it back with a letter to the County Council that the budget's been approved as such. So again, he's back up. So this overall budget adjustment recommendations is basically what our team, our senior staff team, put together to balance the budget. The proposed reductions are as follows: 1.1 million in operating decrease and a 2.2 million in decrease in capital requests. So we're going to just take a look at a summary. This was a summary slide of what we needed to do for operating. We asked for 47.9, where they're appropriating 46.8. That's where you get the 1.1. Capital projects was 2.7, and they're approving 505. So that's where the 2.2 comes in. Debt service is being approved. So looking at it by object instead of by those categories, because there's the 11 categories, we're just going to go through by object. So salary and wages is the first one, and we're looking at decreasing there 516,000. So that comes with some increases. What we needed to do was go back to the budget that you had approved in February, and we found out new information since we had presented it to the County Council the first week in March, that we needed to add a community school coordinator as required under the new concentration of poverty state aid. So that was an increase in the budget that you had approved. Adding the implementation coordinator was back in because the County Council was originally thinking about putting that in a grant as opposed to into operating, but they did put it in operating. And the third item were 2 instructional assistant positions that are currently paid for out of a TSI grant that we no longer are receiving, and we need those positions. So we put those back in the local budget along with all of our pre-K IA portions of salaries. It was like a 25% of IA salaries that was being paid for through a pre-K expansion grant, and because we have all-day pre-K in all of our schools, we no longer qualify for pre-K expansion because we offer pre-K to everybody, and it's all day. And 1 behavioral specialist that we had in our blueprint grant that ran out, so we wanted to keep that in our local budget. That person's been helping at several of the schools. So those are increases in salaries and wages, and here are the decreases. So this is a proposed net decrease of 516,000. So that's, we had requested 4 English language learner teachers in our budget. We're going to keep 2 in the local, we're proposing, and then moving 2 EL teachers to an ESSER 2 grant, which does support the expansion of English language learner populations. 5 instructional coaches and 2 special ed coaches, career ladder coordinator. Those are all support positions that we originally didn't have in our budget in December and January, but we added them in February because we could see that some of the things that were coming out of the blueprint, a lot of our teachers needed some support. So we still feel strongly that they should be funded, but we are putting them in a LEADS grant. We have received approval on the first round of the grant with some clarifications. We did get those back. Dr. Einhorn is the lead on the LEADS grant. And we've submitted that. We did get back saying that now we have a vendor list, so now we have to resubmit it, but we really feel strongly that we're going to get this LEADS grant, which would be able to support those 8 positions. Move 1 new behavioral specialist to the health department that was in our original budget, and 2 social workers to social services department. And I have talked to Dr. McGuire from the health department and Linda Webb, who's the director of DSS, and both of them are willing to enter into memorandum of understanding and fund those positions through those departments. So those positions would stay, as they're not in our budget, but those positions are being filled. We did receive just last week a notification that we're going to get some increase in special education grant funding. And actually part of the grant funding is requiring us to look at access and equity in special education. So that makes sense to put the Access Equity Progress Coordinator in the special ed grant and as opposed to the local grant. And we did have a gifted and talented teacher position that we did not find a place to fill because we can't put it in a LEADS grant and we can't put it in the ESSER grant because it doesn't meet those requirements. We do have a grant for gifted and talented to do some transitioning this year from 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th. So we can take a look at that, but that's not, right now, that is not in the budget that's proposed. So that's the net decrease in instructional salaries. What we could do is we could take a look at staffing and look at if there are any positions, for an example, if we aren't able to fill something, that could be something that we do, or if we look at any positions that are on hold. So that's something we could do. Proposed revision and contracted services. We do have annual software subscriptions, and we are able to move those to ESSER 1 because most of them are tutorial type subscriptions, and that grant does support those to continue. So we did get additional funding in that. And when you come to materials of instruction and supplies and materials, there are various instructional materials that we purchase from the board office through curriculum and special education. And we can prepay some of those on because we do have some excess up here because of some of the positions we weren't able to fill, and some of the materials that we had from last year that we had left over during COVID. So that's $94,000. And the materials of instruction that some of the schools had asked for, we can put in the ESSER 2 funds because some of the materials that the schools asked for were to work with the tutors. And we do have quite a few tutors in our school with the ESSER grant. A lot of the tutors are either retired teachers, people that have moved to the community. Actually, somebody came up to me and met me the other day, and she said, I'm a retired teacher, and I love tutoring at White Marsh. And she introduced herself to me, and she says, you know, I go 3 days a week, and I just love it. And, I mean, it's paid. She gets paid. But so we're really working on that, but the materials now we can put in ESSER 2. So that's a decrease of $125,000. And other charges, we do have a couple increases in other charges. I really want to thank Sarah Jones for thinking out of the box here because we're a little concerned about some of the energy costs. We were on a call with our Energy Trust Consortium the other day, and they were talking about how everything is going up and, you know, be prepared. If the increases continue through the summer and it becomes extra hot, or the winter and it's cold, you're going to see some energy costs going up. So we did in this budget, to balance the budget, we put $128,000 in energy and utility cost increase, and we did just get notified. Terrible timing to be notified when you're in the middle of a budget process, but the state retirement sent us an email saying that our state retirement costs are going up $185,000. And I know the county's not happy about that either, because that means theirs went up as well. So everybody's a little surprised on that one. I mean, we knew there would be a slight increase, but this was a little more than a slight increase. But because we did not fill all of the positions that we had put in the budget in local, we have a decrease in the FICA and health insurance cost and fixed charges for the positions that are not in the local budget, but those fixed charges are now in the grants. So that's why there's a decrease. So the net increase here is $45,000, which it would have been a lot more if we hadn't have put some of those positions in grants. And proposed revisions to land, buildings, and equipment, and this one really focuses on equipment and technology. Our budget that we sent to the county council included iPads for grades 2, 6, and 8. because we try to keep using them as long as we can, and we pass them along. We still want to keep in the budget second grade and sixth grade, but because ESSER 1 came out with an amendment to use technology for this ESSER, we'd like to put those in there and then not do the 8th grade iPads and wait until next school year to put the 8th grade iPads, and they'll just continue to use their laptops. So the kids that got those laptops, they would have had them, I guess, is it Steve, 6th, 7th, and 8th? Or... Right. 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 So this will be the 7th year for the 8th grade, which means it's at the end of its life. So next year, we should make sure we put in that $189,000 for the iPads for 8th graders. So we've earmarked that. And that's a total decrease of $414,000 that we were able to do with equipment. And again, here is it by category. So I shared it with you by object. Here's by category. And again, you do see operation of plant increase. Please note that increase in operation of plant is the utility costs. That's why there's an increase there. Everything else is a decrease. And if this all is said and done and approved by the board, then we would balance the budget as appropriated by the county council. And again, a couple cautions. I'm going to say them again just because I think it's important that this is a more modest inflationary increases. Please note that the consumer price index inflation at 8.3 over last April, and energy costs have gone up 27%. We may have to dip into the fund balance next year at some point, but we're hoping that we've captured some of that with some adjustments. Also, we did remove some of these because we've prepaid some things with some savings from the year before. And we need to be aware of the cliff. I don't know how else to explain it, but some of these grants, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, will expire in the coming years. And these are some things that we're just going to have to figure out what we need to do. Now, some things, like for an example, the devices, the second grade and the sixth grade iPads, they're going to be good for the next 5-6 years. So that's not going to be on the cliff, right? And the network security upgrades aren't going to be on the cliff, but summer school will be. So some of these will be that you're going to have to put back in. And I just think it's important to note. And the big one is 9 buses for next school year. So one of the things that I think would be really advantageous this year is to be on the lookout for some used buses that might be going up for sale. So that might be something too we can look at. So that's a possibility. Legislative mandates, there's some things that are coming up legislatively, not this year, but down the road. We're pretty good with the 10% increase. We'll have to do a 2.6% next year in order to meet that 10%. We're on the road to getting the starting salary of teachers to $60,000 by FY27. But according to Blueprint, more teachers will have to pay for teachers to get nationally board certified, and once they do, their salaries increase. So that's something that's coming up. Starting in FY25, we're going to be required to pay for AP testing, AA degrees earned by students in high school. Sorry, Macy, you graduated too early. And also, they're saying now that by FY25, we'll have to purchase zero emission buses. Stay tuned on that one because I'm not sure that's actually going to happen because that's a pretty high price tag. Zero emission buses cost twice as much as the buses we have, and that doesn't include the batteries and the charging stations and and all the things that need to happen with that. And then there's a Time to Care Act. That's actually effective next year, and that is when the employee and the employer put into an account for money for people to be able to take 12 weeks leave with pay, which may change but those are some things that are coming up as mandates. And last but not least, we do have a fund balance. And as Mrs. Jones said, our policy 4.17 says our goal is to get our fund balance to 17% of our operating budget, and we're only at 7.7%. It's nice to know we have a little cushion in case some things come up. And so at this time, we're not recommending using fund balance at this time, but that really is up to the board. What we tried to do was balance the budget and recommend some things to you so that you're not dipping into it and that you are keeping it as your policy states. So capital request, you know, I just want to thank the county council for paying for 4 of the things that were on the list, which are up here. Excuse me. And when we look back at the paving of the bus lot and the access road, we're going to continue to look for some grants for that too, because that might come out somewhere. And turf fields we talked about a little bit earlier in the open session. So that's, I'm going to go back to this slide. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Any questions, we'll be happy to entertain. Any changes, just let us know. Whatever you want to do. That's our proposal.
I am always surprised at how you can pull a rabbit out of a hat every year. Both of you, everybody who was involved in this, kudos. So, I mean, it looks good to me. The one thing that I would say is that I just want to reiterate my commitment to that GT position. I think the transitioning GT students, that's really vitally important. And I would request not that we pull from fund balance to cover it, but that it stays at the forefront of planning. So as we move forward with hiring, what's happening, looking for ways to get that in before next school year and maybe not deep into next school year. But otherwise, well done.
And thank you. And I really want to thank Dr. Einhorn for taking the time to apply for the LEADS grant, because that has been really true saving grace. And I know that her doing that application, she relied on everybody else. Kevin, Darlene, Sarah, Lynn, all of us jumped in. And we did a lot of brainstorming and her whole curriculum team and reading specialist, everybody jumped in to work on the LEADS grant to make sure that we were trying to, number one, provide support for our teachers because we know they need that support. And number two, making sure that we're providing all of the things that our students need to get to where they are and where they need to be academically, and really support the blueprint pillars when it comes to wraparound services at our schools, because mental health is so important. And that's why those social workers and behavior specialists are important. So I really want to thank that team for that.
Any other questions?
I make a motion that we approve the budget as amended and presented this evening.
Aye.
My last budget.